Sounds good. When you can hear me? How's that now? Is that okay? We're trying some new equipment here, so please bear with us. All right, I'll start the CEPTA meeting tonight with a few announcements. Again, the restrooms are over here, little baked goodies in the back, coffees and teas, if anybody would like, please feel free. The programs that we're going to have in the upcoming months, in May 14th, that's 1 week earlier than we usually have our meetings. That will be 1 week before the actual election day. So we're going to have probably the last candidates night in our area for it. So I have flyers that I'll put out in the front and people can pick them up just so you can get some information on that. The next one will be June 18th. That's a standard meeting time, and that will be for a commemorative celebration. That would be for our forces in uniform, other people that help serve the communities on a volunteer basis, just to have them maybe come and speak, and we can thank them for their help. And then July 20th, that also coincides with Emmaus Community Days. Planning that we'll have our picnic then, and we'll use that to spread our word around and have people come in and participate on community days. They're going to have a whole bunch of different things happening at Community Park in Emmaus here, so it should be a good time for everybody. We'll have one of the pavilions in the end. So please come out and join us. And all these topics that we have are video recorded for broadcast later, and we have a host site that puts them up, epcat.us, where you can go and see all of these programs that we put up, and some from before. So I'll start the meeting now with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would mind joining me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you wouldn't mind standing just for a little bit with commemoration of what happened up in Boston, not commemoration, but prayer for them. Thank you very much. And now I'm just going to pass it over now to our presenters. We have Lynn Donches, who's on the school board, and Giovanni Landi, who's an involved parent that helped put this together. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for coming out.
Okay, thank you for coming out tonight. Such a beautiful evening. I appreciate you coming in and for your interest in the East Penn School Board budget. I am wanting to thank you for helping me to put this together, and he's much better at PowerPoint than I am. And just wanted to say this is a pretty high-level presentation, just some things that you may or may not know about the budget or how it's put together. And I put around little cards and pencils. And what I'd like to do is run through the whole presentation uninterrupted. And then there's a slide number on each of the slides. And so when we're on that slide, if you have a question, or if you have a comment, or you have a suggestion, if you could note it, that will make it easy for us to look at that slide and refer to it at the end of the presentation. Am I in your way? Oh, you're okay. Okay. So first I wanted to say a couple caveats that yes, I am on the East Penn School Board. I'm in my second year of a 4-year term. However, tonight I am just presenting as an individual. I'm not representing anything about the school board. And the data is from public records or from materials that have been handed out available from the administration or public records. And except for the 2013-14, it's a draft. It's the first release of the information from the administration. It will be continually, I'll probably say this a zillion times throughout tonight, it will be changed until the budget gets approved at the end of June, which it must be approved by the end of June. So our meeting will be June 24th. That will be the last meeting. After the May 13th meeting, there will be a preliminary, tentative, final budget, which most likely will get posted on the school board website, as they have in years past. And you will be able to see it there and come and make comments or write in your suggestions and so forth. And 20 days before the June 24th date, it must be the proposed final budget will be available for public review, and it must be available 20 days before the approval, and it will be announced 10 days. It needs to be announced 10 days before it's going to be voted on. So you'll want to, I'm sure you'll want to be following all along. And then, as I said about your questions and suggestions, if you would put them on your card as we go along, that would be great. Okay. So I wanted to go over a little bit about what one thinks about when putting together a budget. We have to think about how many schools and the capacity, how many people are in the schools, what our enrollment is, who the personnel is, the budget itself, some challenges that are coming up or that are always on administration and school board mind, and then some resources that you can take advantage of. So first is our schools. So I thought I'd just play a little how many people or how many schools are in use at East Penn. So how many think there are 5 schools in the district? How about 10? How about 13? Okay, There are 10 in use. There are 7 elementary schools that house the kindergarten to 5th grade. There are the middle schools at Higher and Lower Macungie, which are 6th grade to 8th grade. And then the one high school, which has all the 9th graders to seniors in it. Okay. So what do you think? Do you think they're full? Do you think they're all full? Do you think they're all empty? What percentage? Who thinks that they're overfull? How about not full enough? Okay, well, if you took all the numbers, overall, it's under capacity by 12%, but the orange, however, that caution, is here is a listing of all of the schools, and you can see at what percent capacity they are, and the red at the bottom for the East Penn or Emmaus High School is actually 4% over capacity. So 93 students over capacity. So even if you have 31 students in a class, that's 3 classrooms. So it's a little tight at the high school, and most of the other ones, look pretty well. Now we can't really say, oh, there's 1,000 seats. Let's, put everybody over there. How about how many students? 7,543. Going? 8,038. And how about 10,005? Okay. That's the 8,038 of March of this year. So there's your kindergarten and your secondary, elementary and secondary breakdown for the total of 8,038 students. All right. How many people make the whole thing run? From the teachers to the admin, to the custodial, to the cafe, to the assistants, to the technology people. How about 1,057? 834. 777. Okay. 1,057. Alrighty. And how that gets broken up is in the next chart. So as we would hope, the teachers make up the majority of the personnel and the instructional assistants. So those are the people that are helping our students get educated, so that's a good thing. 49%, and these might not have like to the 0.23 or anything like that, so generally this is 49%, that's about 521 teachers. And then the assistants are there 236. There are 83, about 83 custodial and 66 cafe. There are 38 administrators that make the whole, so all of these people, and then the other ones are little by little, smaller percentages, a half, a 1, a 3, or whatever. But I think it's just interesting to know that as you're putting a budget together, that you have to think about all the people that make the school system run. And then these are just others instead of a chart for everything, just to let you know, we have 808 special education students. We have the gifted, almost 500. The almost 300 that go to charter schools. And 33 special ed charter school children. And we have a per pupil faculty ratio of 15.6 students to a faculty member. And the Pennsylvania average is 13. So you can see here we're very efficient. And also the pupils per management. Normally, in the average in Pennsylvania is 162 pupils per administrator. However, in East Penn, there are 251. So each administrator is on average dealing with more students than the Pennsylvania average. Our total debt, our local debt that we owe, our bill, our credit card, or whatever you want to call it, $117,787,770. Technically, if you took all our bonds and folded them down, added them up, it would be about $150 million, but because some of them are construction loans and we get reimbursement from the state, then it brings our local effort down to this number. And we pay that off at about $15 million, a little under $15 million now, at least this year. This is how much we'll pay off on that. So little by little by little, it's coming down. And I'm going to say, it maybe, I'm thinking 6 to 8 years, it looks a lot better. So, and then if we took all of the real estate in East Penn and said how much tax can we bring in, we would tax that on this $5 billion. The value of the real estate, taxable real estate in East Penn is that $5 billion and so forth, the number that's there, $5 billion. Now the 1 mil is the $4,737,708. And for in the past, you might remember, we'd always talk about 1 mil is about $1.6 million. But because the reassessment was done by the county, now the assessment is at 100% of the value instead of 50%, so this changes the mil. And I really wish they would have made it just $5 million, because the math would be a lot easier, but now we have $4,737,000. And here is East Penn. I think we're fortunate in that we get a pretty high percentage of our real estate tax is collected, and we're really fortunate in that regard. So where does the money come from? Here again, the draft number for 13-14 is $118,734,545. This is how much revenue we expect to have collected from all of the sources that we can collect revenue from. And so we get that from the 4 different parts. The local, which is the bigger part, the 77%. We get from the state. We get just a little bit, 1% from the federal. And then it hardly shows that 3,000 is like almost 0%, and those are fees and rentals and things like that, just a little bit. So of the local money that comes in to East Penn, the East Penn district itself, where do we get our local money? And the majority of it is from the real estate tax, as you can see. 85, close to that 85% is from just the real estate tax. And then there are interim real estate taxes and utilities. The 9% is the earned income tax. And you might remember that the hockey in the hockey stadium people in downtown Allentown wanted to keep that for themselves. And some school districts and municipalities got a little up in arms and said, oh no, we want to keep that. So thankfully that came about and we gained that 9%. And then all the rest are, little. And then where does it go? Now, the number out of the box is spending $130 million. This is sure to come down. The administration works very hard on trying to keep this number down. And it will change, as I said, it will change until June comes around. Right now, 42% for the personnel and 20% for benefits. And the thing is, this is contracted. This isn't going to change. It's around 60, it's a little over 60% of the budget for the contracted personnel and the benefits for them. And then we have professional services and other purchase services. We have supplies, equipment, and other objects. And you might think, well, what does all of that mean? Well, one of the ways that you can find out what that means is by going online and finding the Manual of Accounting and Financial Reporting for Pennsylvania Public Schools. It's a chart of accounts, and every school district in Pennsylvania has to use this book to code their expenses and their revenues. So if you're going to 500 other purchase services, you can see, oh, well, there's student transportation services, there's contracted carriers, there's the insurances in there, there's the general insurance, there's the fire insurance, automotive liability, there's bonding insurance, they're under 500, there's communications, and there's advertising, and there's printing, and there's binding, and there's tuitions to other schools. So you can see there's a lot in the 500s, but what makes it nice is that you can look at your book and you can see exactly what the 500s are. There's travel, there's food service, there's miscellaneous, so, there's all kinds of things. In the other objects, we have dues and fees, and we have interest, and we have a contingency fund. And then it gives you an explanation of exactly what the school district can assign that number to. And then, for every number, for revenues and for expenses. So this is my best friend. And this I'm just going to let you stare at for a while. This is year to year. Now you can see on the actual for 2007, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, all the way up to 2011 and 12. We actually have actual numbers that have been audited and so forth, so we know that those numbers are solid. Now what is tricky is right now it's March, and the budget has to get approved by June. But school isn't out until June, or the middle of June. So a budget is being put together now, without knowing really what the total expenses are going to be this year, what we're going to finish out with this year. So it's, sort of like you can do your best, and that's really what you can do. So the budgeted part of 2012-13, those are still only budgeted numbers. That's the school year we're in now. Those are the expenses that are going out now. And then the 13-14 is, as I said, the first numbers out, sure to change. but I'm just going to, it's a lot of numbers to look at, so I thought I'd just let you stare at it a minute, and then if you have questions for your cards or anything, you might want to say something. And you can think without me talking. Can always come back. Now I'd like to talk about the ending fund balance. By policy, 5% of the operating budget must be put aside in what's called a budgetary reserve. That's by policy. So you can see the green going across. The green is always 5% of the operating budget. The purple is what's called the uncommitted fund balance. That means at the end of the year, that is the money that hasn't been spent. Now the purple includes the green, okay? Or blue, sorry, colorblind. And then the purple, if you put the purple, stack it on top of the green, it equals, what color? Blue. Okay. So, let's look at, I just want to say, let's look at 2011 and 12. We see that the ending uncommitted fund balance was $13,793,000. We see the budgetary reserve is 5%, $5 million, and then we have that purple that's left over. Actually, that year was budgeted that we were going to spend everything down to $28,135. But it went, we actually had a $2,712,234 difference when the budget and all the books were filled out. So the $2,700,000 was like a gift. No monies that didn't get spent. And what happened is more revenues came in than were expected, and not as much spending was done that was budgeted. So then we had this difference of $2 million. So that makes that ended uncommitted fund balance bigger. Okay? So this year, the year we're in now, 2012-13, we're supposed to spend all down to $8,485. So then we will see at the end of the year, you know, what is left over if we really spend that down. Does that make sense? I hope it's a little complicated to explain. And then out of the box, the 2013-14, to spend everything down to the $300,394. Yeah.
Hopefully you all can hear me. Just one point to make. The number 8,485 for budget 12-13 and 330,394 for budget 13-14 is assuming that the budgetary reserve gets spent, but it doesn't. So when you see that number, don't think that that's what they're gonna end up with at the end, because the budgetary reserve, just the way it's accounted for, has to be accounted as an expense. So even though they go into this not anticipating to spend it to the state, it gets reported as an expense. So when you see those numbers, don't think that they're gonna finish the year with $8,000. The budgetary reserve most likely will not be expended. So I just wanted to point that out.
And the budgetary reserve can only be spent with approval of the board. However, the other part of the ending fund balance can be spent. It's not allotted to any particular budget line. It needs to be transferred, and those transfers need to be approved, but they can be spent during the year. So this just shows the different, it shows the amount that was budgeted and then the actual, this is actually the ending fund balance. This includes everything. And you'll notice in 2011 and 12, that up at the top, it says 15 million, where on the previous chart it was just a little over 13 million. And that's because now there are what are called committed funds. At the approval of the majority of the board last year, those, it was a 1.25 million reimbursement from the state for some construction that we got to incorporate into the budget. A majority of the board voted that it be put into committed funds for the pension, as opposed to having it offset the tax increase. However, it's interesting because usually the board is very cognizant about using one-time funds, meaning money that you only are going to get one time, to use for expenses that will only be paid once. So, you know, maybe you're going to buy bookcases or a truck or something that you would only buy one time. However, this was used, a one-time money, for a pension cost, which is ongoing. So that was a little different. However, and we'll see. It's always interesting to see this fund balance. And around the state, there were a lot of articles on this last year around this time about how much funds different school districts had in their balances. And the governor was actually asking that the school districts start to spend that down because it's billions of dollars across the state when it all gets added up. And there's this, why is it growing? It's hard to show in a slide, but what happens is the revenues are sometimes underestimated. You're doing the best to figure out how much is going to come in and how much you can safely expect to come in. And then you're budgeting your expenses, and they're over, you know, maybe you don't spend all that money. So then we're getting just that little bit, $1 million, 2 or 3 at the end of each year, which then is allowing that fund balance to grow and grow. And then when that is bigger, and then remember your budgetary reserve is 5% of the overall budget. If you have a bigger budget, then you have a bigger fund balance. And then to the challenges ahead, the PSERS, the Pennsylvania State Education Retirement System, the PSERS, is the retirement system for public employees, school employees. There's also the SERS for the state. And I'm not going to go into the history of how this all got there. I think over time, you probably have heard the presentations, but we know that they are going to go up by large percentages. The 12.36, this year it's 16.75, the 21.25, 25.56%. So this is a huge amount of money. And the only way this is going to stop is if there's reform in Harrisburg. So I hope that this gets you fired up and that you will want to talk to your legislatures and say, you know, we need to do something here. Do you want to add anything to that?
is the red line and what is the blue line?
The blue line is the contribution from the district, and the red line is the percentage increase. Projected. This is all projected. Nothing set in stone here. And it depends on the, how many students and so forth and so on. So.
The red line is the percent of salaries that is required by the state. It's not a percentage increase.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Percent of salary. The state is required.
Okay, we will verify. Thank you. It is the increase. That's, yeah, it is how much is going up.
It's the percent of salary. So we have to pay 16% of salary in pieces this year. 16.75%.
Right.
The percentage increase is 30% from last year to this year. It's from 12.36 to 16.75.
It's not a percentage of the teacher's salaries. They're not paying $1 more, really. They did get a bump, but maybe that's the calculation, obviously, but that's your percent increase in your contribution.
Yeah, that's
Doesn't
the
matter.
percentage of whatever the salaries are.
That's the
That's the percentage of the salaries that we're required to pay into the pension system.
Right, but it comes from taxpayers, right? But it's still your increase, yeah.
It has nothing to do with, it's.
Did I say that, threw that off because we're saying the same thing?
Okay. I think you're,
I think we're all saying the same thing.
no,
That's
it
how
has
it's
nothing to do with an increase. It is,
The percentage of
it's the percentage of salaries that the district is required to pay in the pension system.
Right, yeah,
That was one of the questions.
That's a function.
right. And then, as I said before, our challenge is the capacity in the school. So that's always on the radar of administration and the school board, just always something to think about. And then these are in alphabetical order, since I'm a librarian, so I do think so. It's not like, this is what I think is more important than something else. The Common Core curriculum. This year we will be spending $185,000 to bring the math curriculum up to par. This is, of course, a proposed number. And this is a national education program. It's kind of like the Child No Child Left Behind, and that is almost over. And now the Common Core is coming up. And maybe we'll have in the future presentations on the pros and cons or the different points of view on the Common Core. The cyber charter school funding is an issue. A student who goes to a cyber charter school where the money is paid for them is actually the same as if someone who goes to a brick and mortar school. So the formulas need to be readjusted. And this is something that you can talk to your state legislature for. There's nothing at the school district that we can do, but it's something that you should possibly, care about and talk to Ryan or Justin or somebody about. Developments. When there's developments, as there are developments, kind of like in the offing in East Penn, that's always something to be looked at as to whether that's going to bring more students into the school, what age the kids are, and how many there would be. Is it high density and lots of apartments, or are they single homes? All of these things factor into the future in putting together a budget. The property taxes, sadly, it is a tough time there, and as people perhaps there's a fixed incomes to begin with, but then there's also people who are losing jobs and are not getting paid as much as they when they take a new job. So that, and there are different propositions and proposals on different ways, instead of property taxes to fund the schooling, of possibly having sales tax, or there's hybrids. So there's often articles or in the papers that where you can follow possibly some of that legislation that's happening. The special education funding has been frozen at least 4 years. Here in East Penn, it's a level line. And East Penn has a very good, of course, East Penn's a very private school district to begin with, but they also have a special ed curriculum that's well respected, and people do move into the area to take advantage of that. So we need to balance all of those balls. And then the transportation costs, it's a big one too, with, it's almost just between 6 and 7 million here in the East Penn on our budget line for transporting the children. And one of the things that adds into that transportation is for charter schools and for parochial schools, private schools, if you live within there's a perimeter, and then if you need to bus students that are going to school within 10 miles of that perimeter. So it all adds up. So there's just a few challenges. And then some resources I wanted to share to the East Penn School District site. If you've not been there, I suggest that you go and see what's there. There's really a fair amount of budget information from over the years. And you can find, if you're a senior, you can find the form there if you qualify for a rebate on your tax. There's always the final budget. The Pennsylvania Department of Education requires that after the budget is approved, that the 2028 be filed, and the school board does put it up there. And you can see a little bit more like some of the numbers that I was telling you about in greater detail. We do have school board meetings, and they are the second and fourth Monday of every month. But I would check that if you're thinking about coming, making sure there is a meeting, that it's not a holiday or the summer week off, something like that. You can always speak. You're always welcome to speak. The public is welcome to speak at the school board meetings. And what you do is when you enter, there's a table with a form, and you put your name and I believe address and phone number, and just note what it is that you want to speak about. And then after the meeting starts, Mr. Ballard, who is actually here tonight, the president of the school board, will call you forward, and you will have 3 minutes to present your comments. There is no dialogue. It's not a conversation. And I know it can be intimidating, but you can go and know that you were listened to, okay? And also on the site, you'll see the school board section, and you can see the agenda is posted on a Friday for a Monday meeting. So you can see what items are coming up to see if there's anything that you want to talk about. And then you can see all in the back, or many years worth of archives going back. And also, you will see links to all of the school board members. So you can communicate through email if you would like to. There's a link to everybody there on the board. And then if there's something that you don't see that you'd like to see, there's something called the right to know. It's a form, and you can go to the open officer and request if you know of a document, or perhaps you went to a meeting and you heard something mentioned that wasn't attached to the agenda, then you can jot it down and you can put on the form, I would like the blah blah that was passed out. Maybe, for instance, at the last meeting, there was passing out of the capital projects, and you could be at the meeting and hear that that was passed out, and then you could write and say, I would like a copy of the capital project sheet. And then because that is in a form, it is a document already created, then you should most likely be able to get a copy. There are a few exceptions, and the open record officer knows all those. You will know within 5 days whether you're going to get it, or maybe you'll get it within 5 days. Sometimes you'll need an extension. They'll need an extension if it's a lot of information to pull together, or the time, whatever, and it could be up to 30 days. And then there's the annual financial report. This is I like this one. It's more information than the 2028. It's filed after all of the books are closed out at the end of the year. Every municipality, every school district, every government entity has to file an annual report. And It usually gets filed, you know, even though school is done in June, so you have the books and, you know, close out everything. I believe it's October that it gets filed. And sometimes there's revisions to it that get filed later. Maybe if the auditor has something to say, then there might be a revision. And then one of my favorites is the line item budget. It actually is over 3,000 lines. And you can see, and it's based on my favorite book, The Chart of Accounts. You can see every cost divided by the budget line. So if you'd like to see how many salaries go to elementary or to secondary, which school, of football, it doesn't, you know, whatever it is, it's very specific. And it's very informational to understand that there could be 5 or 6 pages of lines just for autism, or there could be pages and pages just for special ed. That's very informative to someone who's making the budgetary decisions. And then last but not least, and John mentioned this before, that there's a group called the East Penn Citizens for Accountability and Transparency. And you can go to their site, and there's not only school board meetings there, but there's borough meetings and whatever meetings we can get around to and take that are public meetings. They're unedited. I know there's been discussion at the school board about having the school district do the webcasting instead, so that's an issue, but we don't edit, they're not edited. And then just some other resources, of course, I keep talking about my favorite book, but that's up there. And then there's the Department of Education, a great place, you know, because those are the numbers that the state has accumulated. There is an OpenPA.gov, it's an organization or, you know, that does put up a lot of different statistics and school reports and so forth. There's the Pennsylvania School Board Association. This is a way to know what they're a lobbying group for public schools, and you know what issues are top of mind for them by going to their site and seeing what you know, school boards and school districts are concerned about. It's a good one to look at. And then there's the National Center, which is the national statistics. The Commonwealth Foundation, which is a more conservative but a good place to get another point of view. And there's the public charter schools. So if you think you'd like to know more about charter schools and how they work and so forth, it's an excellent place to go. So, and that's really all I have. Hopefully you did. Before I start, I will say that I may not know all the answers to your questions, so hopefully you'll understand that.
Are they ever going to put it on TV like they do the board meetings at Mayor's Borough?
And we could certainly have that as a suggestion. We could take that as a suggestion or ask anyway to see. You know, Dr. Steinberger has mentioned before that he used to have TV shows in other districts, and I think he's kind of fond of that idea, but I don't know about the school board meetings.
Yeah.
I just want to add one comment. Mr. Bacher, thank you for pointing out that slide. This presentation, we will upload it so that if anybody wants to, and they can go to the CEPTA website and they can have access to this presentation that was made tonight. We'll get that slide corrected. That was one of the questions that I had, was how that increase was being accounted for as far as if it was total salaries or year over year. So we'll get that slide corrected so that when anybody goes to see this presentation online, they'll see the corrected slides, because we're just, at least in my case, I'm just a public citizen, so I'm doing the best I can with the information, so.
I think the slide was okay, it was just the explanation.
The way I said it.
Yeah, I'll double check the math though, just to make sure, because I don't want to put any incorrect information out there.
You mentioned the CEPTA website, what is that?
The CEPTA website, I believe, is septapa.wordpress.com. This, hopefully we'll have the video listed there, so people can actually listen to the video and view the presentation, and we'll have the slideshow up there so that you can just watch the slideshow in case there were any numbers you wanted to see. And at this point, if there's any questions or suggestions, and you'd like us to put a certain slide up so that you can ask questions or suggestions, now would be the time.
Sure, thanks. That was awesome if I could get a copy of that, so I'd like to get that to our Pennsylvania School Board Coalition members all around the Commonwealth, because I think all 500 school districts should have a similar presentation put together. So excellent work on that. If you go to slide 14, I got 3 suggestions. You know, our group can run the numbers, but it's nice if we can get the administration to do it. Obviously, it makes it easier. We always hear about how charter schools cost money, and you alluded to that in one of the other slides.
Correct slide?
Yes. However, if you look at that number, 290 plus 33, that's 323 students that are not in East Penn School District buildings. So it might be interesting to debunk the charter schools cost money argument, because how much would it cost to build 30 new classrooms? That's where the savings is. It's an elimination of projected construction spending, which, as you saw, we already have $15 million of debt service a year for expanding schools. When you have to do it, yeah, you have to do it, but that's a big alleviation. It'd be curious to see what those cost projections would
Well,
be.
you could put up her,
Sure.
could put up her slide and see if there's any room in any of the schools, and if you see, most of the schools have room in them.
Except for the high school, right.
Well, she didn't leave, she left off a little note that's in the actual budget that says a lot of those high school students are at LCTI.
Oh, that's a
So the
good
high
number.
school is actually lower this year than the previous
Right.
year, and lower than the previous year.
However, again, it still defers future construction because you have a couple years to fill up those available spaces, but eventually you're going to have to add more students. So it'd be curious to run those projections. Like I said, we'd be happy to do it if we get the numbers. Suggestion number 2, if you go to slide 23, this gets back to the pension costs. I would suggest the administration start planning for reality. We're going to start talking to state legislators and have PESers do this. The Government Accounting Standards Board implemented new rules which take effect either next year or the year after, because basically they got wise to the scam. Every government entity is way under-reporting their actual pension liabilities. CalPERS did it, which is the California state retirement system. They did it voluntarily at the beginning of this year, and their pension obligations were triple what they thought. Other entities have done it voluntarily, and they're coming up with the exact same. It's actually triple. So those numbers should be triple. So it'd be good to get the administration way ahead of this curve, because you can't afford a tripling of those numbers. You'll destroy the whole economy by raising property taxes that much, or you're not going to be able to pay your bills one day. So I would get ahead of the curve, because that could hit in as few as 2 years. And again, we're working on that at the state level. Lastly, the general fund numbers are awesome, equating to tax hikes. There was a series of articles several years ago that brought up that issue. I also would suggest, we're seeing, because we're doing 25 alternate school district budgets now we're working on, and we haven't run the numbers yet, but it's looking like every penny of every tax hike has merely ended up in the pockets of employees in the form of wages and benefits. Not one penny of tax increases have gone to the children. And we all have a common agenda, although, you know, one side seems to portray the other as, you know, we want to destroy public education and we hate kids. You know, I ran over a few on the way over here just for the fun of it. However, excuse me, sir, can I finish my suggestion? So it would be interesting to run those numbers, because actually I think even the tax increases aren't keeping pace with the wage and benefit increases. So obviously, you know, healthcare, you throw in the PESers, triple the PESers, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7% a year increases, and I'm talking about Commonwealth as a whole. We have the East Penn numbers, we'd be happy to release those, but I would really, again, get ahead of the curve, because the tax hikes aren't keeping pace with what's going into employees' pockets. And that's the problem with the budget. Anyway, thank you.
Would anybody else like to?
Yeah, I don't understand, I mean, 2 years ago, just for the comment that the tax increases are going to employee pockets, before I was on the board, 2 years in a row, the unions took, most of the unions in the district took pay freezes during the depth of the recession, and so there were no,
No, they still got step increases.
not 1 year. The first year, there were no increases at all, not step, not anything. And so it's hard to say, especially that year, that any tax increase went to line pockets of employees because there were no raises that year.
Medical benefits, fees, contributions. It's an easy number to run.
I know, medical benefits don't go into the pockets.
Yes, they do.
employees.
Yes, they do.
I assure you, as an owner of a business, I couldn't hire the employee without paying it, it went to
That's why we need to enroll teachers in Obamacare. You save tens of millions of dollars.
Let's keep it civil, please.
They're not
One-
free to the district, but it's not,
One-
I mean, the suggestion is
It's
that
not-
people are,
it's not
employees are
cash.
getting rich off benefits increases. I don't think employees are
If you
getting
pay
rich.
$150 a month for a family of four.
All right, well,
you get
let's
rich.
come back, just where we're arguing semantics.
Look at the
But
numbers.
just to point out something though, the year that the teachers did take a freeze, just teachers and administrators, the year that salaries were frozen, you can see the actual budgets year over year had hardly any increase at all, so.
Which lines?
It would be, if I had a laser pointer, you'd be looking at, let me see here, okay, 2010, 11, 2011, and 12, so you can see down at the bottom here, the totals.
1,210.
Well, the ones, 300,000 more, but I think that also that year, the superintendent did put some restrictions in for spending and tried to curb spending as well, so.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on those, offer an opinion on those comments that you gentlemen made, but you go to chart, well, you are at chart 19. I still thought it was interesting, and I thought maybe if somebody has an explanation, you look at a 6 to 7 year period from the beginning of the personnel services and personnel benefits. You'll see in that 6 to 7 year period, or was it 7 years, you'll see that both of those figures jumped roughly $10 million in a 7 year period. So I think, is there any comment on that as to
I'm sorry, which items are you saying?
personnel services salaries, personnel services benefits? You see 2007, 2008, it has a figure, and you look at the projected 2013, 2014 as a figure, it's roughly, give or take a little bit there, it's $10 million over that 7 year period.
That would be due to contractual.
Contractual
Yeah,
obligations.
they're also contractual.
Okay, just that jumped out at me and I wanted to point that out. Thank you. Also since I guess it's my turn with the mic, chart 22. Talk about how budgeting is there. I guess, did I understand you correctly say that spending is overestimated and revenues is underestimated, which gives you then actual excess that you budget one figure, but then I think I understood.
That has been
standard operating
past
procedure.
years. I don't know if it's a standing operating procedure, but it's definitely.
So that's how you get the excess that you hadn't budgeted for.
That's what's happening.
Okay, thank you. And let me see if I have another thing. Yeah, on 23 was the big challenge of, that's all right, I'm basically doing someone else.
Yeah, I noticed that not too long ago, benefits were running about 30% of above salaries. This year I saw it was close to 50%. What's going to happen to benefits as opposed to salaries in 2017 when you're projected that, the PSERS fund is going to go to, our costs are going to go to $9 million? Are we going to be paying like 100% of salary to benefits, or more?
I would hope that the legislature does something about this problem before we are spending all of that.
That's where it looks like it's
I don't
headed.
know if it'll be that much, we'd have to look at the charts and the projections and so forth to know if they're gonna be that much.
Yeah, but that's where it looks like it's headed, so that's a huge issue.
The pensions aren't here.
Yeah, you know, the pensions, with 0% interest rates, the pensions that the teachers and administrators in all the school districts get, you know, come out to probably around $80,000 per year for 30-year teachers, which comes out to, you know, a $2.5 million benefit, which puts the teachers, retired teachers, in the 1% class, which, you know, they're supposedly public servants. I'm a financial planner, and I see how much money it takes to create 90,000 safe dollars right now, and it's huge. You know, the best professionals, you know, the finest doctors, best lawyers, don't make that off of what they've saved. So there's a big problem coming up here, and we see it coming, and we need school directors that will, you know, put their foot down on you know, what's going on here.
But it is a state issue, right?
Right, that was one of the things.
But it's
You
not.
would have to do the contract. You couldn't-
Non-contract.
It's,
I mean, you would have to freeze the wages, you know,
This-
forever.
Public
you know.
state legislation.
If you have 1% wage growth over the next 20 years, the pension problem will get under control. If you have 7 or 8% wage growth, your pension numbers explode also. It's called compounding interest in reverse.
No.
well, that's part of it, because the higher the salary goes, the higher the percentages, but
Yeah.
this is really an issue that, as far as the pension portion of it, that's maybe the small portion of it, but the majority of the problem for the pensions is going to be a state level issue. Along with the fact that, as far as for Pennsylvanians, I'm pretty sure that they're going to see the same impacts from public salaries, not just teachers and administrators, but from the legislators' pensions, from every public pension out there. That's a pretty, it appears to me at least, that it's an unsustainable number, where if Pennsylvanians have to foot the bill for every public service employee, it's gonna be unsustainable. So the message would be for everybody to talk to your legislators and ask them what they're doing about this. So, on this subject,
Yeah, just on this.
anybody else on this subject?
There's actually new scholarship out there among actuaries and investment planners and et cetera. There's a new term they invented over the last year. It's called depletion date or run out date. What they're starting to do is predict when all of these public pension funds run out of every last penny they have. And basically the latest estimates say half of the national public pension plans will run out of every dollar they have within 5 years. And Pennsylvania is like in the top 20 worst, like Peters and the other state one, Peters and PERS. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Gontel, you had a comment?
Oh, I actually have questions.
Okay. Questions?
In slide 15, there was some discussion, and you don't have to bring the slides up for this, but
Closer.
debt versus future building costs. There was things in there about debt and where it is right now, but I don't see anything in there accounting for, there's land that's been purchased for a future high school. What's being done to plan for these costs that are going to come up down the road? I mean, we're saying we're going to be out of debt in a couple of years, but we could potentially have more debt on top of that. So I'm not seeing that, and I'd kind of like to try to see what those numbers, are we looking ahead in these budgets, and how are we accounting for future debt?
That's a good question. I mean, it's always on the radar and certainly, you know, on your thinking, but there's no projects that I'm aware of anyway, you know, in the offing.
Okay. The other 5% reserve, you said it's mandated. Is it a federal, state, or local mandate?
This is actually a local board policy.
Okay, so it's not something imposed upon us. We impose it on ourselves.
Right.
Okay. I'm trying to see here. If those monies aren't spent, do they get applied to the next year or just the next year's budget, or do they have this idea that if they don't use it, they're going to lose it, and we better spend it?
No, it gets carried over from year to year. So you can see that one chart that we have with all the little green ones going ahead.
Okay. And the other question I had is on Common Core, and you have PSSAs. You know, I've had 3 kids go through the school district, 10 years apart. I've seen the changes over 10 years. I'm not happy with the federally mandated programs. And when I look at this and I'm going, well, we're paying, it's roughly 1% the federal government gives us right now in money. But then if we do Common Core, we have to pay $185,000 for math. Now, what happens if we have to do it for English or another class? Then it's less than 1%. Do you mean to tell me, and that 1% that the federal government gets, this comes out of my tax anyhow?
Yeah.
So it's a vicious circle here.
No,
For
it's a
1%, we
question.
can't find 1%. The teachers don't like these programs. It takes away from the dynamics in the classroom.
I
Can we
asked
not-
the question, like, if we don't take the federal, do we have to do all of these federal programs? But I know, actually, Dr. Seidenberg said we would look into it, but the thinking is that they're also related to state monies, and in order to get the state then to.
Common Core is a state program, is a requirement of the
But
state.
it's-
So they opted in.
But the federal government's opposing it. Obama was the one that sent out the study for this
No,
in
it's-
2009. Yes, he did.
The states are opting into Common Core.
They're opting
and-
into the federal government.
And the question about the English is our curriculum was already 97-something% aligned to the Common Core in English, so we didn't have requirements. There was more of a gap in the math, so that's why there was.
But my question is, for less than 1% of the budget.
It's not for that. It's a state requirement. The state says you must do this, and we have a timeline.
So what is that not her percentage? Is that,
20% of the budget, according to her slide, was coming from the state.
so in other words?
The states are starting to overturn it though, because Common Core was implemented without a vote by the legislature. So,
But right now, the district has a requirement from the state to align with the Common Core, and so that's where it's
So it's
coming
another
from.
thing I need to get on, we need to get on our list.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's a lot of
Really
things.
pounded on me.
I can let you know there's a meeting about that very topic, so I'll get your contact information. But yeah, the legislature is now waking up to what Stan was ruled in.
I don't know, I've been sending a lot of emails to a
We're
lot of
talking about-
legislators.
all right, let's-
Still not-
Yeah,
not-
speak into the microphone, please.
Just to try to straighten out a couple of things. There are 2 different areas where we're getting these requirements from. One is from the federal NCLB, and the second one, Common Core was a curriculum by the Governor's Council that was set up. All the governors of a number, I think it was 44 states, approved going to Common Core, and all the governors agreed that they would try to implement that in their states. So there are 2 different initiatives coming from 2 different directions. NCLB is the federal government, Common Core is the state governors that are pushing this.
Any other comments on this topic, or if not, a new topic?
I'd like to go back to slide 19. I'm looking at the bottom line coming across, and there are 2 numbers at the bottom for 10-11 and 12-13 at 110 or 111 million. The next number is 125 million. That's more than any level of inflation. That's a 13%, 14% increase. Also, what is the percentage of increase for the budget this year between the 125 and the 130 million? Both of which are higher than these 1.7% increases in the taxes. So it seems like there's a lot of money in increases in actual, not just dollars, but actual percentages of increase. Do you know where this comes from, Lynn?
Yeah, and there's a good chance that this year, even the 124 won't be able to grab a book.
Here. One of the things to take note, though, That's the total budget, so remember that includes the budgetary reserve fund in there. So there's money in there that is not planned on being spent. That's just the totality of the budget. As I said earlier, the budgetary reserve has to be accounted for in the expenses category. So unfortunately, even though you don't plan to spend it, it shows up as an item in there. And I'm trying to think if we did a slide that shows, no, it's hard to, I thought we had a slide that covered that, but we
There's a
don't.
lot of, there's some slides that so much data, it's hard to put it on to have it say what you'd like to say. But let's say, for instance, this 2011-12, we ended up actually spending $110,811,415. That was also budgeted at 120,319.
Thank you very much. Gives me
It
that.
gives you a good idea of how much it differentiates.
Back on slide 15 or 16 or 17, you said that the,
Expert error.
well, she got past it before I wrote it down.
Okay, good.
What is it about?
She said that there's about 4% of the people who are not paying their taxes. Is the board looking into why the people are not paying their taxes? And are there any creative plans to help the people pay them and or to ameliorate their condition if their condition is lousy? Because I know that the school district has to be paid, but rather than get involved in selling people's houses, can they get involved in seeing to it that they do something beneficial for the people rather than just simply say, well, you didn't pay, put it down to the sheriff's office.
You pass the mic, thank you.
I'll try to answer that. First of all, that 95%, 96%, there's always some lag in some people not paying their taxes in a given year because of either circumstances or sometimes they move away and somebody has to track them down. So there's all kinds of things about that. There have been a lot of flaps in Allentown and other places where they try to get these aggressive law firms to go after people, and then people complain about being hounded by these lawyers to death. And so you've got to balance all of that off. Right now, it's a pretty good collection rate overall for the state. Now, as far as East Penn goes, we have at least 2 plans to help out that a lot of other districts don't have. We were the first district in the state to have a matching rebate program for low-income senior citizens on the rent and property tax rebate. If you qualify for the state program, you can also apply to the district, and you'll get twice the amount of money back, because we match what you get from the state, essentially. So there's a dollar figure slightly different, but if you qualify for that program, we have a fund that we use to cut the taxes of some of our more deserving senior citizens in terms of low income. Also, there's an installment plan for paying your taxes, and that can be utilized. And just recently, the legislature passed a bill, and I don't know where this is going to go in our district, but we could offer programs for senior citizens to come into the schools and work off their taxes. But as volunteers or not volunteers, but classroom aides,
$60 an hour.
whatever the aides are paid, But I mean, those are the kinds of programs that we have available right now.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to add, I'm not exactly sure which line the 95.91% comes off of, but there's also a 2% discount for paying the entire tax bill by, is it August 31st? And so it could be that some of that money is in a discount. I take it also.
Yeah, you too.
That's cheap money.
Yes. Especially now, you can't make 2%.
Yeah, you said 2% is good at return.
Any other comments?
Well, then I'd like to say thank you. Hopefully everybody learned this one thing that they didn't know before. Very good. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming out. some of the comments that were made from the public, that's how you get things done. You find information out, you share stuff, you work together. Usually works a lot better that way. Again, thank you very much. There's a flyer out there for our next program. Again, the Candidates Night, that's coming up next month, May 14th, 1 week earlier than we usually have our meetings. And that will be for anybody that's running for any position in the East Penn School District, basic geographic area that we can vote for, including the Lehigh County Commissioners and the executive. There's like about 30 candidates, I think, that fit that description. Thank you again. Good night.
Back to the meeting.